All right, welcome back. And in this session, we will cover about controllers. So controllers basically is the one who is responsible for managing the incoming and outgoing information. So it is the one who decides what information to fetch and what information to display. So like for example here in our home page, as you can see here, the corresponding controller for this page can be found at app controllers slash home.php. So right now, what we are seeing on this page is being managed by the home.php controller. So if we're going to check our code under app controllers, and then under controllers we have home.php. So basically this is the actual code where it generates the content of our homepage. So as you can see, we have the class name called home, and it inherits or extends from the base controller class. So right here. So this is the base controller class. So it's as much as possible, it is not recommended to edit this file. All right. So the next is we have here the function. So this is what we call the action, and home is our controller. So in our CodeIgniter, it follows a certain pattern or a routing pattern. Like for example, if we have the URL www.google.com slash let's say about slash let's say details slash 1 slash 2 slash 3 and so on. So in our CodeIgniter, it follows a certain pattern when it comes to our URL. So right now the google.com is our URL or our server name. The about is our controller, and the details is our action, and the rest after the action is what we call the parameters. So normally all of these information are added in our query string. Like in a traditional PHP URL, it should be like this. So google.com question mark let's say controller is equals to home about, and action is equals to details, and our let's say a is equals to 1 and b is equals to 2 and c is equals to 3 and d is equals to 4. So this is from our traditional PHP URL. So these are what we call the query strings. So still, these can be called a query string, but in a different format. So that's how CodeIgniter reads our URL. So if we're going to change this from, let's say, person, then automatically CodeIgniter looks for the controller called person. But right now, our URL is, let's say, this one. So how come CodeIgniter's pull outs the controller home and the action called index? That is because by default, our CodeIgniter under the config and then the routes file, we set that the default controller is the home, like that. That's why in our URL, it doesn't contain any text like home slash index. So right now, since it is the default controller, then it will automatically load this controller without checking the URL and the format. Okay. So like for example, if we're going to add another action, let's say public, let's say function, let's say products. Okay, let's comment this out. Edit, forgot the toggle comment. Shift out A. Okay, so shift out A, multi-line comment. All right. So right now we have the controller with another action called products. So action is equivalent is also the function of the class. So let's try to check that. So the format should be slash home slash products. All right. So right now we don't see anything here because we haven't add any actions or commands if the user lands on this URL. So maybe let's try to print with the text. Let's say welcome to products. There you go. So as you can see, the CodeIgniter will display anything under the actions or under the product action. So that's how the CodeIgniter follow the format. But if you can see here, we have a certain function here called view. So what it does, so it loads a certain view from our CodeIgniter view library and display that to our user. So view loads all the files under the folders views. So right now, we didn't load anything from the products view or action. So let's try to create another file. So as you can see here, it's under the welcome message. It loads that file. So for us to properly organize our folder, so let's create another folder called home. And under home, let's create our view file called products.php. And instead of displaying or printing a text, let's change that to return, and it will return a certain view. Like for example, under home, then we'll load the product. So home slash products. So you don't need to add the extension file for the view since CodeIgniter will load that automatically for you. Okay, so let's refresh that. And we don't have anything here because we didn't add any text in our products file. Let's say page 1, welcome to products. Okay, so let's refresh that. And right now, we have successfully loaded a certain content to our URL home slash products. So next, what are these parameters are for? So these are parameters should be added in our products uh, as a function parameter. So let's say dollar name comma dollar price. No, category. So let's do that. So in our URL, as you can see here, we have here certain parameters that can be found after the action. So like for example, our details here is our action, and the parameters comes after the action. And these parameters are basically just function parameters where you will need to assign it from our URL. So let's say in our URL, let's add a value for our product. Let's say set the name. Let's say um, say Colgate, and then the category. Let's say hygiene. So far it doesn't do anything. That is because we need to these Colgate and hygiene value will automatically be assigned to the name and category. All right. Let's say echo dollar name. Let's do that. And as you can see, the variable name will automatically hold the first parameter in our URL and maybe in our category. Let's do that. Let's print that. And the two of them has been printed or catch using the variables. All right. So next, what if we need to pass these variables or information to our view file so that we could mix it in our actual HTML or actual page. So to do that, we need to assign it to a variable, to an array variable, and let's say, for example, data name is equals to dollar name dollar category. Now, once we have added in an array, we can just pass it as an argument in our view function. Then let's display that. Let's say dollar name and refresh that. And we have successfully added the code in our view file. Since later on, we need to pass, let's say, information, or let's say we need to calculate data first before we need to pass it in our view file. So always remember that on the actions or in the controller, all all calculation, all logics should be done in the controller, and after that, all of the outputs or results should only be done in our views. So we need to separate them. We have a term what we call separation of concern. So this means that we need to separate the logic and then the design. So controller is the logic and the views is the design. Uh, right. So later on we can embed Bootstrap or Materialize or even jQuery in our CodeIgniter project. So what else? So I think we need to create another controller. So we just need to create, let's say, home. What else? Let's say students, and we just need to copy this and remove the unwanted code and rename this to students. And by default, we need to set the default action as index. So as always, um, the here I'll just we're just gonna show it to you. So like for example, we have here the students, and by default it loads the index action by default. So we don't need to add index here, but by default, if no action was mentioned or called, automatically the index function is being loaded. So what will happen if we didn't add it here? What if we don't have an index? So let's remove this and enter, and usually there is no file because we didn't specify an index action. And as to organize it again, we need to for us to load the correct content for our index our under the student controller. So we need to create another folder called students, and under the students we need to create a new file called index.php. That is to match our controller and action. So obviously we don't need to specify it in this order. uh, CodeIgniter can read any views as long as it does exist, but for as a good programming practice, we need to organize it later on so that it will be easy for us to locate our files. So let's say here index, so it should be students and then index. So let's refresh that, and obviously there is no content for us to see since there is nothing here. Say hello students. There you go. So basically that's how you create pages in CodeIgniter, by specifying the controller and then the index and which views you need to load for that action. So you can add another parameters under the action method or in the index function. Let's say student ID. So for you to pass or send information using if you're going to need to pass in the variable student ID, so you need to change this to index slash, let's say 2020 slash 1234 slash a. So let's just pass a variable called student ID, then student ID, and let's print it. And let's refresh that. So as you can see, it displayed the information coming from our URL. It's the same thing. Earlier we created this, we did this. So it's the same approach here. So instead of directly creating a new array inside our method or function, we just created a new variable. Oops, sorry. Forget. dollar data. So it's the same thing by uh, the first second approach are the same thing. So let's refresh that. So same thing happened. All right. So again, that's how you create a page by declaring a new controller for a class called students. So students is a class which is also the in CodeIgniter it is the controller and followed with the index. So that's it for now and hopefully you have learned. So see you in the next video.